Hi, friends. In today's episode number 4, we will be looking into some of the other configurations, basically related to site values, location, and values layout. So that's what we are going to see in today's video. If you are watching my video for the first time, my name is Sriram Sivashankaran, and I have been posting videos, documents, articles, user manuals related to Dynamics 365 F&O on a regular basis. And right now we are into warehouse management series, and we have already covered 3 episodes which covers basics about warehouse management processes and setups and stuffs. So if you have missed those topics, please do check out the same. And if you want to get regular updates, please do follow my profile. Okay. So let's get into today's episode. So in today's episode, we will be covering some of the important setups related and setups more than setups. I would say submasters which are related to site values and locations. So that's what we are going to cover. So for the purpose of this video, I just made a short presentation so that we both are on the same page. And so this will be our episode number 4 regarding the warehouse management module. And the agenda today we will be covering primarily in getting into the configurations and the basic setups of warehouse management and advanced warehouse management submasters which are actually required. So, what we will be covering in this session is primarily on two topics. One is related to site values location and the location related submasters. And the next one, we will also see what is values layout and what are the different types of values layouts which are possible. So, whenever you get into any implementation projects, or even if you are an end user, how you can use the appropriate values layouts in order to optimize your values operations. So, that's what we will be seeing in today's video. So just don't worry about that. I'll not get spend too much time in the presentation. At the same time, we will try to shuttle between D365 and the PPT so that it makes absolute sense in order to connect the real-time business use cases. Okay. So first, try to understand what is exactly a site. Site is basically a grouping of business resources such as warehouses, production units, which share interrelated transactions are located at a particular geographical location. So may have business operations across the world, and you may have specific sites in maybe Europe or America or Canada or India, Australia, whatever it may be, or in China. So these are all geographically apart locations, right? So even if you are operating only in India, you may have different geographical locations. Let's say you may operate from Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata. So you may have different geographical locations. So based on these geographical locations, your transactions are interrelated. So you are basically grouping those transactions for a specific geographical location. So those are called sites in D365 terminology. So, and also to be noted point here is, and it belongs to a single entity. So you cannot have a site that belongs to multiple legal entities in D365. And of course, it's not viable to have in case of interrelated transactions, right? So that's what exactly site is. Geographically apart locations, but have interrelated transactions of warehouses or production processes, right? And then within the site, let's say you have a site in India, but within the site you can have multiple warehouses. A site can contain n number of warehouses, which some of them can be virtual also. To manage the warehouse processes, we discussed about yeah, warehouse processes in episode number 1 and 2 also, to an extent. So if you have missed out, please check out the same. I will also provide the link for episode 1 and 2 in the description. So please check out the same and then come back to this video so that you get the full benefit of this entire series. And you need to understand that a site can contain multiple warehouses. The warehouses are the actual features which actually complete your picking, receiving, or warehouse internal operations which is getting performed. And it is actually integrated. If you see, it is integrated with purchase. You need, if you are purchasing, your material is getting received in your warehouse. If you are doing sales, your material is going out from your warehouse. And even if you are doing transfers, you are moving material from warehouse A to warehouse B, then the transfers are happening. You supply materials to production from your warehouse. If you want to perform any quality check, that also happens in your warehouse. So basically, I would say in the entire supply chain, warehouse operations forms the backbone of your entire supply chain operations. So you have to be very careful in how you define the site warehouse locations and the warehouse layouts. Then only you can configure accordingly the same in your D365 system also, right? So first let's get into D365, understand how it can be configured in the case of, so we saw what is site and warehouse. So let's get into D365 now. So in order to configure site and warehouse in the system, so first you only need to do is you need to go get into warehouse management module, or you can also do it from inventory management module. But I would say there is a slight difference into it. Under inventory breakdown you have site and warehouse, or even if you get into warehouse management module, you have the option to configure sites and warehouse. So under setup there is option called warehouse. The warehouse you have sites and warehouses, so just click on sites. So under sites, first of all, already D365 has the standard sites which are configured in the system. So I'm just creating a site for a site WMS. Um, so you need to provide a site ID, which is mandatory, then site name, and then under site you have certain FOSS tabs, which are actually defining how you want to configure the site. So under general FOSS tab, you can see you can enter the order entry deadline group. So this is actually not required, based on which your order entries will be calculated. And you need to, there is a submaster which is involved at the timeline before which you want to process all your orders, based on which your workers will be able to perform the orders for the same day delivery or the next day delivery. So you can do that, and these are all not mandatory, but if you want you can use this. But I would say providing a site ID and address or mandatory. You need to add an address, and this is similar to any of the address master which are available in your vendor customer, where you can add the name you for the what is the purpose you want to do the delivery or a business or whatever it is. You need to provide the purpose, then provide the code, street name. If you make it primary, whenever you perform transactions this address will be taken as primary, right? So if you want you can provide the address. And then hierarchy basically defines the gives you the list of all the warehouses which are under the specific sites. So it provides the entire list for site number 1, these are the warehouses which are attached, and for let's say site number 3, these are the warehouses which are attached. So currently for this site WMS we have not attached any specific warehouses, that's why we don't find any hierarchy over here. And then under warehouses you can also provide a default inventory status. So it can be available, so any material which is getting received inside WMS, I can keep it under the status blocking, so it cannot be used for any other mobile any other operations. And last but not least, allow users on mobile devices to receive at another warehouse. So this is required when this point we will take it up when we talk about the mobile device configuration. And as of now this is not required. So this is how simply you create a site and then you can save it. So next let's get into creating a warehouse. Under warehouse management, it's under warehouses setup, and you just click on warehouses. And here you can create a new warehouse just by clicking on new. So warehouse has a lot of FOSS tabs in it. So let's quickly get into some of the important setups, right? Let's say I'm going to create a warehouse number 16. Don't ask me why I picked the number 16, because 16 is my date of birth. So 16 WMS, right? So this is the warehouse ID which I am picking, and from the site drop down, which is a mandatory field, let's pick the site which we actually created, site hyphen WMS. And the type has to be default, and you cannot have it as quarantine transit or goods in transit, because the once you create a quarantine warehouse, then the quarantine warehouse will come under the drop down of quarantine what are the warehouses created. So let's say for example, for site WMS, let me keep this 16 WMS as a primary warehouse. Okay, I'll hit the save button. um, but actually I missed a setup. That's fine, completely fine, we will do that later. And let me create a new warehouse where I'm creating 15 as transit for WMS. So this is getting created as a transit warehouse for the site WMS. Okay, but I'm changing the type to transit. So since I've created this type as transit, you can see the other two fields are disabled right now. I'll save this. Now if I go back to 16 warehouse and click on this drop down, the transit warehouse 15 will be available, right? So 15 transit warehouse is available now, so I'm picking it. So whenever I do transfers from 16 warehouse, the material will pick warehouse number 15 as a transit warehouse. Similarly, you can configure quarantine or goods in transit or under delivery warehouses. Actually, these are required for your landed cost modules. Maybe when we get into the series for landed cost, we will try to cover that. Right now, this is not important. And now in warehouse 16, you can also configure the master planning, where you can configure the refilling and the main warehouse, from which the master plan will try to pick the material whenever a planned transfer order is getting created. And also you can provide the default receipt location, issue location. So whenever system tries to receive a material, even though your user has not provided a location in the purchase order receipt, system will try to pick this location and complete the product receipt. Similarly for issuing the material, so if you want to provide some default values, you can do that using this submaster. And then location names you can configure based on the aisle rack. So this we will get into when we look into locations. Probably this one we will not touch right now. And similarly we can provide the addresses for the warehouse also. Hierarchy, like I said, now you can see there is a hierarchy which is attached to site WMS also. So by default you can view all the hierarchies of entire sites at the site from the site level. And then you have retail. This is primarily required for retail and commerce, but we will not touch upon this. And then most importantly we have a setup called warehouse. So warehouse first, most importantly, this is the important setup which we have. So like you see here, I hit the save button without enabling this use warehouse management processes. So the moment I hit the save button, then any warehouse which is created, we will not be able to enable this once again. So this is the important setup for us to use the processes like release to arrows, like wave, like shipment, like load, what we discussed in episode number 2. We need to enable this toggle, otherwise we will not be able to use the functionalities or available in D365 for advanced warehouse management processes, right? So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on new again. Then I'm going to 16 n hyphen WMS. So this will be going to be my 16. I'll put as A 16 advanced warehouse management. I'll copy the same. Now if I try to enable this, so this if I enables the warehouse management processes for this warehouse, but for this warehouse this will act as a standard warehouse, right? So this is throwing error log because we have not tagged the site, because site is mandatory for any of the warehouse creation, right? So moment when I tag the site, I'll hit the save button. Now this is saved. So now this will be a warehouse with which can in which we can use advanced warehouse management functionalities, and 16 WMS will act as a standard warehouse, right? So that's what we saw in the presentation also. Like you can have a site based on the geographical locations, and in the same site I can have multiple warehouses. So in the same site WMS, I have a warehouse which is configured with advanced warehouse management processes, and I have another warehouse which follows a standard warehouse process operations, right? So so these are all of the other complex setups which are actually required. Probably we'll get into each and every one thing as we progress in this series. So this is for reserving the inventory. We all saw in the previous episode number 3, I shared a document related to reservation hierarchy. You may need to go through that in order to understand the reservation hierarchy. Financially negative inventory and physical negative inventory can be done at the item model group level also. Let's not get into these concepts right now because it will be confusing. The purpose of this video is to understand site, warehouse location, and warehouse layout. Okay, so this is the basic setup which is actually required for configuring your site and warehouse. So we created a site WMS, and we have created 2 warehouses under it. Let's get into this presentation right now. So, like I said, we have the site and warehouse creator in our system right now. Then, most important part is inside the warehouse, we may have locations. A location is used to determine where items are stored and where items need to be picked. Right. So, let's say it can be a various type. It can be based on the pallet concept. We saw the palletization, how it works, and how the unit sequence groups need to be configured in the episode number 3. So, we can have pallet based storage system where you receive the materials in terms of boxes, and it is getting stored in each and every pallets, right? or you can have a bin based storage system where you have a racking system and have multiple bins. It's purely based on what kind of products and items which you actually use. In case of small products and items, it's better to go ahead with bins rather than going at with box or pallet based storage systems. So you each and every bin have a bin id, and so these bin ids need to be configured in the location master. And in case of palletization, this is where the advanced warehouse concept comes into picture. We have the license plate. So each and every pallet will have a license plate id, and it will be easy for us to move or transfer the materials, and for a optimal warehouse operations. And what I also want to touch upon here is we have standard warehouse. So basically, we have standard warehouse locations and advanced warehouse locations. Both of them behave differently. So let's get back to the system. I'll just sorry, yeah. So I'll get back to the system right now. So if you get into inventory management, so we have inventory management module. Like I said, there are two places for warehouse. But if you want to have standard locations to be created, you need to get into inventory management module, inventory setup, inventory breakdown, and you have a master called inventory locations. So this is where you see only the locations which are not part of the advanced warehouses. So this particular menu item will not contain any of the locations which are part of advanced warehouses, enabled warehouses, right? But if you get into warehouse management module, and then under setup warehouses, um, yeah, so here if you get into the locations, so that is inventory locations, this is locations. If you click on locations here, these basically show us all the locations of the warehouses in which advanced warehouse is enabled, right? So this is what it exactly shows us. So 16 A-WMS is advanced warehouse enabled. We enable the toggle WMS for this warehouse. That's what it is showing here. So you cannot find any of the warehouses which are not advanced warehouse management process enabled, right? So first of all, you need to understand these two differences. So if you want to view the locations which are part of advanced warehouses, then warehouse management, setup, warehouse, and locations, this is the path. Or if you want to view the locations which are not part of advanced warehouses, then you need to get into the inventory locations under inventory management, right? So these are the two separate menu items, so based on which you need to configure, because the requirements for both the locations are completely different. So and then if you see here, even if I get into warehouse management, um, yeah, locations, because here the if I click on new, let me try to create a new location for 16 AWMS, because you can see 16 hyphen WMS is not available over here, because that's not an advanced warehouse enabled warehouse, so that's why it is not visible over here. Then you can provide the location name. Let's say you can manually type this. I'm just providing a receive location. Check digit, if you want to create a check digits, that's absolutely fine, because this digits will be used to identify the locations and also to authenticate the locations. In those cases, check digits can be used. And if you want, you can also use a location profile id. A location profile ID basically defines the behavior of a location. Like item or adult group we have for items, the location profile ID defines how the location has to behave. What are the criterias, how it has to behave? That's what the location profile ID defines. I'll click on view details. So there are a lot of setups available over here. We will see this anyway, but I'm not sure whether we will be able to cover in this video. But let's see. So before getting to location profile, we'll also need to see there are other setups like location formats. So the location format, okay, this is not allowing us to proceed because we have not tagged the location profile ID. Let's say I'll just tag a location profile ID right now for this purpose. Yeah. So we have location formats. So the location formats actually define how you want to store your material in the locations. If like I showed in the slide, we have racks, we have shelves, and we have bins individual bins. Like how, what is the kind of configuration which you want in your warehouse and how you want to store it. Let's say if this is the location format, then the location numbering it's going to take is like 00A 00R and 0 shelf 0 bin. So when the numbers are added to it, it may be like in aisle number 1 or rack number 2, shelf number 3, bin number 4. So that actually helps us to direct to the specific bin location. So what kind of location format you want to have in your warehouse, you need to configure it over here when you were finalizing your warehouse processes. So that is getting defined in your location format. Then location stocking limits. So location stocking limits actually define how much of inventory is allowed in a specific location. It can be done at your product level or product variant level or container level. Containerization is a separate concept. Let's not get into this right now. So I will probably discuss later part of this series. So here, if you see warehouse, you can provide the warehouse location profile ID. Either you can do it at location profile ID level, or you can do it at location level. You cannot include both. So define an item number and how much quantity can be stored in that specific location. Let's say in the floor for D0013 item, size medium, I can store only 300 quantity. So every time when system is going to process the work for the users, the system is going to say, hey, work is created to move the material to the location. The item number is this, and you can put only 300 quantity in this location. So based on which the work will be generated. So location stocking limits, you can also enable this flag allow unlimited. This is basically used in case of bulk locations, where bulk or staging locations, where you just simply want to move the material to a specific location until unless you find space before moving it to rack, right? And so this is location stocking limits. And then we have location profile. I'll get into location profile. And we have location types. Location types is basically used for reporting purposes. You can create a location type as per your requirement. Let's say I'm creating a location type in order to specify for cold cold storage storage. um, so this particular location type will be used only for the cold storage items. So this is basically used for your reporting purposes. So you can define the location types. And if you want to configure it at for the global level, then I think in the warehouse management parameters, um, I will get into I will also show you, because these location types can, once created, can be allocated at the parameter level also. So you can define a staging location type, or you can packing location type, or final shipping location type. So these specific location type system will pick always whenever a work is getting generated for the warehouse users. And this is also will be useful for your reporting purposes. And let's get back to the location setup. So we saw stocking limits, profile types. Dock management profile is useful for managing your inbound outbound docks. So where based on the inventory types, the you can configure whether it can be used for creating the load. So for example, if I click on new inventory time, based on the inventory types, it can be your shipment ID or load ID, wave ID. Uh, it can be mixed based on whenever a dock in the dock, whenever your inbound or happens or your outbound happens. Based on this inventory types, whether it can be mixed and the what can be generated or not. So that can be configured over here. But let's not get into detail of this, because it might sound difficult until unless we get into the concept of, until unless we understand the shipment, load, wave, or other concepts. So right now I'm deleting this. I'm not showing an example in system for this right now. So we'll go back. And then like I said, we this doc management process. And then we have warehouse zones. So you can create specific zones like bulk storage or rack storage or floor. You're keeping materials in the floor or a specific zone, or you can create a zone for cold storages. So you can make specific zones in your within your warehouse, based on which you can store your materials, which is easy for the people to manage the materials inside your warehouse. And then zone groups and zones. So create a zone and then you can tag it with the zone groups. So this is a zone group, right? So you can, if I get into zone, so you can tag a zone group ID over here. So that is also possible. We saw unit sequence group in episode number 3. And then pack size categories is not required when we get into the concept of containerized packing and containerization. We will get into that. License plate, we discussed about it in the episode number 3. And fixed locations is basically you were telling the system that whenever a specific product or item is getting processed, you always refer to the specific location. So it is highly useful in case of processing some critical items, whenever you have lost in first out or first in last out. So those critical items are always processed from a specific location, right? And it can be done at the product variant level also. So now let's get into location profiles. So after you configure all these, then you need to get into location profiles, because location profile actually asks for all these details. You need to provide the location format, in what format you want to have the aisle, bill, bin or rack, and what should be the type, whether it is a staging or cold storage. And then you need to configure the dock management profile, based on which your inventory types can be mixed or not, that will be done. And the location need to have a license plate tracking or not, so that is getting kind of figured over here. And allow negative inventory, we saw this in the warehouse level also, but this is whenever only when we perform transaction you will be able to understand the purpose of this toggle. And allow mixed items, so if you want to have allow mixed items, then yeah, item A, B, C all can be kept under the same location. But if you want to do not allow mixed items, then the location can have only A, or it can have B or C, but not all together. And this is not required. This is actually enable product dimensions. So this, whenever we enable it, so we will be able to enable these toggles for mixing based on this. So if I disable this option, then this is getting enabled. So if I enable this, then I need to provide appropriate dimension which I want to mix. So and then mixed inventory status is fine. We can enable this if you want to have both available and blocking status materials in the same location. If you want that, then you need to enable this toggle. Then we have allowed in mixed inventory batches. Let's say I have a batch A, batch B, batch C for an item, whether I can store all the three batch items in the same location or not. So that's what getting configured over here. And then this is for cycle counting. We saw check digits. And override rules for batch days. This is basically based on the inventory batch expiration days. So this is actually, I would say, when we do the transactions, we will not, until unless we do the transaction, we will not be able to understand this. So we will do that when we get into the later part of license plate and inventory statuses. And then these are the other setups which are involved. So uh, so this is how you configure a location profile. And storage unit, you can also provide the location, height, weight. So when we talk about the racking, so even at that level you can configure it. So system will be basically able to understand how the location is going to be, what will be the capacity of the location. And then you have a option to replenishment exceed location capacity. If it getting exceeded the location capacity, if the location capacity getting exceeded, the whatever the threshold, you need to provide the threshold quantity. It can be in terms of quantity, or it can be in terms of percent, right? Overflow percent, or a threshold capacity, over and above how much you want to exceed. Before, after that, it will not allow you to process. So let's say, for example, if you are going to store 10 boxes in this location, after that you are allowed to store one more box, then based on, you can provide 10%. And then system will allow you to store one more box, and it will not allow you to store more than that. So this is how you configure this location profile. And whenever I attach this bay door location profile to any location, it will ask for license plate tracking, and it will allow mixed inventory status, and it will allow mixed inventory batches. So based on the location profile ID, your location will behave, right? And also, if you see here, we have warehouse layouts. In this case, if you understand, there are multiple warehouse layouts which are actually possible. So you can have a U-shaped warehouse layout, or a L-shaped warehouse layout, or a I-shaped warehouse layout. So there are a lot of based on your processing needs, what kind of products you handle, what kind of geographical area you have. There are multiple factors based on which the warehouse managers need to decide the warehouse layouts. You perform the loading, receiving, you store it, and then you do the picking, and then you dispatch it. So this is the typical U-shaped warehouse layouts, which is often used, which you can say, which is common to see. And then because you have your transportation team comes from the same side, or based on the your transportation needs, you can perform it in a L-shaped transportation, L-shaped warehouse also, where it is easy for you to handle the inbound and the outbound dock. So here there are chances that the inbound and the outbound material can get mixed, but there is a clear distinction over here. And in case of warehouse layout also, so different types of warehouse layouts which are actually possible. So using the whatever the submasters we saw over here, we need to understand what kind of site warehouse locations and location formats, how it need to be configured, based on which you need to decide, based on your business requirements you have to decide, right? And last but not least, I'll also want to show you a quick video. I just got it from YouTube. um, let's say that this is typically an example for a I-shaped warehouse where you have a inbound dock, the outbound dock. I'll just quickly go through this video. I'm not sure whether you will be able to hear the audio, but the thing is, it gives you a good perspective of to the maybe for the freshers, for the not for the experienced professionals, but for the freshers, this will give you a good idea. So you have inbound dock team where, and then you have people who are receiving the material, and then you have the receiving people who sort out the material and then verify it, and based on which they perform the receiving operations, completing the product receipt. So once they complete the product receipt, actually, then the all the list of materials whichever are being received, then it actually need to be stored. So in order to store under the specific locations, we have the put away person who have the conveyors or the put away machines with them, using which they takes the material to the specific aisle and bill location. So this is basically the aisles, right? So we have multiple aisles, and these are racks. So inside the aisles, the put away person goes and places the material in the appropriate location, based on the configuration whatever we have done. So this is what we saw in today's video. So we have racks, bins, based on which they complete the put away process. And then after they complete the put away process, then you can also have a regular picking locations, so from which it is easy for the people to pick and then go for the packing. So the picker who comes for picking the material, he can have a reserve storage, where he quickly goes and picks the material. There is a picking station using which they can take the material and they can complete the picking process. uh, yeah. So this is also the picking stations which they have, using which the picking list, they will go and pick the material, and they go and hand it over to the packing station, where the users, based on each and every item requirements, they complete the packagings, and they handed it over to the people who actually perform the packing operations. And then they will come back to perform the any kind of quality audits if it is actually required, and before dispatching the material. And after the quality audits are performed, then the user has to actually need to dispatch the material. But if the transportation is not available, they can have a reserve staging location for storing the materials, so where they can store the materials before the actual transportation trucks are getting or arriving, right? So there is a storage dock, and then it will be once the trucks are arrived, then that will be dispatched to the respective customers or subsequent operations. So this is how simply a warehouse operation looks like. This is basically an example of a I warehouse layout. Like similarly, you can follow any of the warehouse layouts based on your business and operations requirements, right? So let's get into the next slide. So the next episode, number 5, we will be covering about the mobile device configuration for the advanced warehouse management. And also we'll talk about the release to warehouse. So we'll get into some of the important concepts like release to warehouse, wave, load processing, all those. So if you want to get regular updates, please do follow my profile, and I'll be happy to see you in the episode number 5. I know this is a this video has become a lengthier one, but I'm sure you would have got some important topics. Please do let me know your thoughts in comment section. I'll be happy to hear from you. Thank you.